This is the Palisados Foundation. Palisados was created by a group of expat Jamaican IT professionals to provide equitable access to life opportunities for STEM students. Most specifically, we do this by promoting software engineering education internships for university students on the island. Each student works on one of our open source projects under the mentorship of an IT professional. Stipends are paid upon achieving predefined goals. This program is called the Calico Challenge. The IT sector is a dynamic, growing, and critical international industry that can provide significant financial growth and opportunity for our community. Our internship programs allow local IT professionals to globally compete. We started in 2016. Almost 40 students have completed the program. We have had a variety of current and past Jamaican sponsors, including the NCB Foundation, the JPS Foundation, the Grace Kennedy Foundation, the JMMB Group, Rail Decoy, Sutherland, Backyard Restaurant, Simtai Consulting, Vertis Technologies, the Jamaica Computer Society, and more. In this video, we'll be featuring the work done by students on the Talawa project. This application is meant to be a simple project and event management tool. It is suitable not only for community organizations such as churches and clubs, but also small businesses. Events can be created in the calendar with persons being assigned responsibilities and deadlines. There are news feed and chat features for additional community engagement. Say, for example, a religious institution is planning a wedding. The event can be created, the faithful alerted, persons responsible for all aspects of planning assigned, and registrations accepted. Talawa helps improve the management and engagement of the community. Let's take a look at what the students did in 2020.
Who am I? So my name is Laurell Seville. I'm a student at the University of Technology. I'm doing a bachelor's in computing. I plan to major in computer science, and as far as my personal interests, I'm more interested in web development and mobile application development, and I tend to have more skills and experience on the back end as opposed to the front end, which is one of the reasons why I chose to work on the back end for this application. So what did I work on? So for this application, I was responsible for developing the back end of the application. This included outlining the logic behind the application by creating an API, which is an application programming interface. This allows applications such as mobile apps to access the server and the database it's using. So when we started this project, we had a choice between two different types of servers or APIs. We had to choose between a REST API and a GraphQL API. And after doing some more research about the differences between the two, we came to the conclusion that we would go with a GraphQL API. So these are some of the reasons why we chose a GraphQL API. So firstly, a GraphQL API, a single query can be used to retrieve multiple resources. So let's say you were making a website for a football club. For some reason, you needed information about the team, its players, and its matches. If you're using a REST API, you'd have to send 3 different requests to get the data, like the diagram on the left. While if you're using a GraphQL API, you'd only need to send 1 request. That's the diagram on the right. That pink icon is the logo for Apollo GraphQL, which is an implementation of GraphQL. So it's a popular library. That's all that symbol is. Another reason we chose GraphQL is because with a REST API, it doesn't allow you to get specific data, meaning a large amount of information is presented to you regardless of what you want. So for example, if you had an application that stored information about books in a library and you wanted to get the ID, the genre, and the name of the author of the book, and you were using a REST API, you'd be presented with all of the information relating to the book, after which you'd have to select the data you needed most. On the other hand, if you're using a GraphQL API, you could query that specific information. So this is an example of what a GraphQL request looks like. So you'd see the book and you're targeting the author's name directly and you're targeting the ID and the genre of the book. The third reason why we chose GraphQL is because requests using GraphQL are faster and more efficient. So basically, because the REST API returns too much information, it's not as efficient as a GraphQL API. While using a REST API, you would end up using more processing power than necessary, as a REST API would retrieve an unnecessary amount of data for each request. A GraphQL API, on the other hand, only retrieves the data needed and therefore saves on processing power. Key features of the API. So before I list the milestones of the API, I thought I'd list the features that are most important. So firstly, for image upload in the API, we decided to implement image hashing. So firstly, an image hash is a unique string that can identify that image. Imagine a situation where a user uploads a profile picture and other users see that profile picture and like it, so they decide to download that user's profile picture and use it as their own. What would happen is you'd have multiple copies of the same picture on the database, taking up unnecessary space. Image hashing prevents this as it ensures only one copy of a picture is stored on the database. This is done by keeping a record of the hash of every picture uploaded to the server. And before a new image is uploaded, we check to see if its hash already exists within the database. And if it does, it will not be uploaded. We'll just use the image that's already stored. So we also decided to allow users to create private organizations. So let's say you're in a company and you want to use your application, you want to use our application to manage tasks relating to your employees. You probably wouldn't want random persons to be able to join your organization and see the information meant for your employees. To prevent this, we allowed organizations to be made private, meaning when an organization is private, users have to send membership requests to that organization to prevent outsiders from joining. Another feature is that organizations can block users. This hasn't been implemented on the front end, but it's there in the API for future development. So basically, one of the problems with allowing all users to send membership requests to private organizations is that they could possibly bombard organizations with membership requests if the requests are continuously denied. To prevent this, I allow for organizations to block users. Once an organization has blocked a user, the user will no longer be able to send membership requests to that organization. Um, Next feature is organizations can remove themselves from search results, making themselves invisible to the public. So let's say that after blocking a user, bombarding the organization with results, the user makes a new account and continues to do the same thing. To prevent the organization, to prevent this, the organization can remove themselves from the search results. This would prevent users from being able to see the organization and being able to send it membership requests. Another feature of the API is that we wanted to ensure that users of the application could easily pull the application from our Git repo and set it up within a short amount of time. So let's say a company wants to run our application on their own server. All they'd have to do is clone our Git repo, which has all of our code, and enter some configuration values, and they'd be good to go. So these are the values that the organization would have to enter. So the first three values relate to MongoDB, which is the database that the API is connecting to. So now I list the milestones that I worked on. So for June, I worked on login and sign up, creating, updating, and deleting organizations, allowing the creator of the organizations to remove and add other users as administrators for the organization, and allowing users to join and leave public organizations. In July, I allowed users to send membership requests to private organizations as well as cancel requests previously made. Allowed administrators to request and reject membership requests. I allowed admins to block users as well as removing the organizations from the search results. And in August, I implemented user image upload. So the users could be able to upload, remove, and replace their profile pictures. Admins of organizations would be able to upload pictures for the organization, and I implemented image hashing to prevent duplicates of images in the database. So what I've learned. So what I've learned. So firstly, I learned how to work with other developers on a project. So I've only previously worked on personal projects where I was the only developer. So it was definitely beneficial to be exposed to the nuances of working on the same project with other developers, learning how to communicate with them efficiently, and handling changes being made by other developers to the same code base you're working on. Another thing I learned was how to deploy an API to a Linux server. So the only operating system I was really used to was Windows. So learning how to deploy the API to a Linux server was definitely a great learning experience. I also learned how to better manage different development environments such as development and production, which will definitely help me in the future. Last thing I have is learning how to prioritize app features. So working on a project like this with a limited time frame definitely helped me to learn how to prioritize working on features that users would most care about instead of features that, though they may be necessary, aren't as important as on the user side. Um, the end. So I realized recently that I didn't include the resources I used for creating the organization, for creating the presentation. So basically, I use the upload documentation, and there's this YouTube channel. I wasn't going to list it, but this YouTube channel is where I got most of the information about creating a GraphQL API from. So the difference between this YouTube channel as opposed to the documentation is that he created videos regarding niche topics like authentication, authorization, and some certain specific issues that the most users won't ever come across. So he goes in depth on certain topics regarding GraphQL. So that's one of the reasons why I use his YouTube channel. So that's the end of my presentation. Um, any questions?
Yes, we have some questions from Sheldon. He was asking whether you'd thought of doing any LDAP support or other types of authentication methods.
At the time when creating the API in June, I had limited experience with authentication and authorization in APIs, so I didn't really think about other methods. But that's definitely something we can explore in the future.
Any other questions? All right, so there's a question for the presenter. Which branching strategy was used, and what were some of the challenges, if any, that you faced in this area regarding the branching strategy?
So basically, on my fork on my GitHub account, initially in June and July, I was just using one branch. Well, I tried using multiple branches for different features, but I didn't really see the value in it because the application was so small at that time. So I didn't really I didn't consistently create new branches. So I just kept on pushing changes to the master branch. But later on down in the summer, so in August and July, because I started working on more projects and I started experiencing how things are done in like the real world. So Git repos, I started creating um I created a production branch. So whenever I made changes for a month and it was time to push it to the live server, I'd push those changes to the production branch. And then for next upcoming weeks where I knew that the front end developers wanted something to work with, I just didn't change whatever was on the production branch. So that's mainly what Git branching strategy I use for the time period. So I had a main branch and a production branch.
Any other questions? We have a question here from Sheldon. He says that 90% of large-scale web and app development is done in Linux. He's surprised that you guys are using Windows so much. Why is that?
Ease of access, I guess. Like most people are introduced to their first computers on a Windows system. So and they stay on that until they're like 15 when they actually experience the world of computing, and it's kind of hard to change. That's the main reason, I think. That's the main reason.
Well, for me, it's more like sometimes I'm using Linux and I come across like some very niche issues and I just don't know how to fix them. And for me, it could take a really long while to figure it out. But I've basically already done all of that in Windows. So I'm quicker at using Windows when I need to solve some very simple niche problems that it's not very apparent how to solve them in Linux, essentially.
Well, I would strongly recommend you guys put a larger emphasis on Linux. So I took a look at this at the high school level as well. And for CAPE and CSEC, everything is primarily taught with Windows. I had some interns this summer, and they were computer science students who just finished sixth form. And the first task for them is, you're not doing anything with me until you know Linux. So you have to start earlier, because if you compare it to the American students, they're introduced to Linux from the high school level. It's not just a college thing. And given that Linux is free, it should be very accessible to any students involved in computer science on the island. So that would be my recommendation to you guys. Don't just live in the Windows world, because if you're doing anything, whether it's as simple as app development, even developing Windows applications is mainly done on Linux nowadays. So I would strongly emphasize you guys spend some more time getting familiar with Linux and processes based on Linux.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's just I don't really. It's not that I don't use Linux. You know, it's just that when it comes to solving certain problems, I can do them more quickly on Windows. So I'm familiar with Linux, just not everything essentially.
That's totally true. I agree with you, Sheldon. But I'll also say that it's just well, perhaps the state of things, because I didn't know about Linux until I really was in like sixth form, and I just decided to do some research and came across it. And then and even by doing that, I didn't really see the value of it, of learning Linux until I came to university. So most students don't really see the value of it, because that's not what they grew up on. So I think it probably has to be something tackled from the high school level.
Well, actually, we're introducing Linux at the primary level now, mainly because management is significantly easier. And at that age, kids won't really know the difference between Windows, Mac, or Linux for the types of applications they run. So we want to bring open source into the Jamaican curriculum as early as possible. The obvious reason is the cost, because open source is free. So that will significantly reduce schools' budgets for computing resources, especially around software and licensing costs. At the high school level, we're definitely introducing it for CSEC, and we're trying to figure out how to bring it in earlier than CSEC. But it would be switching over everyone doing Pascal and all the other useless languages to making them learn C, Python, Java, etc. on Linux-based systems for CSEC and onwards.
I'm glad to hear somebody mentioning the uselessness of Pascal and how we need to replace it with Python. That's true.
Well, 25 years ago, them teach me Pascal in Jamaica. And over the course of 25 years, I have never used Pascal once. Not in university, not in grad school, not in the real world. So sure, it's a good structured language to learn, but it's the type of thing I would teach people for like 2 weeks and then you dash it away. Kind of really serve no purpose beyond that.
So I wanted to build upon what you're saying, Sheldon. There's a bigger issue as well with not having a knowledge of Linux in the Jamaican context is that once students leave the university system and are not familiar with open source and Linux, when they get into the working world, they're going to be familiar with Windows and as a result suggest Windows solutions. And so that now creates an economic tax for the organizations that they're going to be working for, because you now have to buy licenses, you now have to get a lot of support features and maintenance that is not necessary as much with Linux. It's more optional. And so there's an economic cost beyond just the human inconvenience of using Linux on a day-to-day basis. Many of the students that I've spoken to as a part of the program are aware that on my system at home and all my laptops, I'm a Linux user. I use VirtualBox and bring up Windows when I need it, usually just to do Microsoft PowerPoint and maybe Word when I need better features that the open source products don't quite have yet. And so that provides a benefit. Many of the students do have dual boot systems, and so therefore they can do Windows and or Linux, but they don't seem to have the capability of doing a virtual machine in one of the other operating systems. So they have to shut down Windows to do Linux or vice versa. And so therefore there's a tax in actually using it. And so therefore if you wanted to bring up a Windows or Linux instance, it's not easy. And so one of the things that can help in that regard is students can start thinking about getting laptops that have more cores, if possible, which will allow them to have this duality that they don't have at the moment. But I think these students at the moment are very aware of the pros and cons after being a part of the program. So we should see some improvements next year. All right, do we have any more questions?
And I want to point out one quick thing with Linux. Linux is primarily on all embedded devices as well. So if you expand the world of computing, it's not just web applications, right? It's going to be your fridge, your toaster, networking devices, and so on. So if you leave the what I would call the active user interface world, a lot of other devices out there, and whether it's telecom or networking or anything else, that's primarily Linux. So if you want to keep options, you don't want to just do web applications or mobile apps. If you want to do anything else in computing, all the way up to supercomputing, it's going to be Linux-based.
There's another thing that I don't... Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to ask Sheldon if he knows about WSL. That's Windows subsystem for Linux that allows you to run a Linux terminal inside of Windows. Okay.
That's been around for like 20 years. It was initially called Windows Services for Unix. It does allow you to run, I think they have support for Ubuntu now in a container. But, there are different ways of accomplishing running Windows and Linux or multiple operating systems side by side. My preferred method is in a VM because I don't have the patience to keep rebooting. So that's how I handle it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you guys need help with that, just feel free to reach out. We can walk you through the different steps and techniques and make it easier for you to learn. Because, I was very surprised when you said you can do things faster in Windows. I've never heard that whole career. But again, it's based on what you're used to. But just in general, Linux has way more powerful tools available for free than under Windows.
There's one other thing that I would also suggest for the students. When I went to university, and I was telling somebody this just maybe two or three days ago, during the very first semester of my engineering course, we did programming. I did a half course in Fortran programming, and the bug hit me, and I continued with it right throughout. This current curriculum in the universities don't introduce coding until the third and fourth years, or to any major degree. And so I would really strongly suggest anybody that's a part of the computing clubs of both universities to really strongly encourage students to start coding from the very beginning, and start getting involved with Linux from the very beginning. It's an invaluable tool, and have the pain in university and understand what it's going to be, because when you get out into the work world, it's going to be much easier for you. Thank you for listening. If you are interested in participating, donating, or sponsoring our activities, then please visit our website at palisados.org. This is the Palisados Foundation.